Think about this for a moment, right now, at this very second, in one of the most remote corners of our planet, in a place where sunlight has never reached, life continues, quietly, slowly, in the darkness. Perhaps you've wondered what exists at the deepest point of the ocean, what swims, crawls, or drifts through that endless night, what secrets hide beneath 7 miles of water, in a realm more alien than the surface of Mars. Tonight, we're going there together, not in a hurry, not with flashing lights or dramatic music, but slowly, gently, the way the ocean itself moves in those deepest places. We're going to descend, layer by layer, into the Mariana Trench, the deepest known point in Earth's oceans. And I promise you, this journey will be unlike anything you've imagined. You don't need to remember any of this. You don't need to take notes or stay alert. Just let the words wash over you like water, cool and calm, carrying you deeper with each breath. Let yourself sink into the story, the way a single snowflake might drift down through miles of dark water, taking its time, unbothered by the weight above. Because that's what we're doing tonight. We're becoming that snowflake. We're becoming the current. We're learning to breathe in the language of the deep. The Mariana Trench lies in the western Pacific Ocean, east of the Philippines. It's a crescent-shaped scar in the ocean floor, stretching over 1,500 miles long and 43 miles wide. But it's the depth that takes your breath away, nearly 36,000 feet at its deepest point, a place called Challenger Deep. To put that in perspective, if you placed Mount Everest at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, its peak would still be more than a mile underwater. The entire trench could swallow a dozen Eiffel Towers stacked on top of each other, and there would still be room to spare. But numbers don't quite capture it, do they? They tell you the distance but not the feeling. They measure the depth, but not the darkness. They count the pressure, but not the profound, almost spiritual silence that exists down there. So instead, let's imagine it differently. Imagine standing at the edge of the ocean on a calm morning. The water is clear, gentle waves lapping at your feet. You can see down maybe 20-30 feet through the blue-green water. Fish dart by, seaweed sways, light dances on the sandy bottom. Now imagine walking forward, off that shallow shelf, and beginning to sink, not quickly, not with panic, but with the peaceful surrender of someone who trusts the water. You descend through the sunlit zone, where everything is bright and familiar. Colors are vivid here, the blue of the water, the silver flash of fish, the golden rays of sunlight piercing through from above. This is where most of us know the ocean. This is the postcard version, the documentary footage, the snorkeling vacation. But this zone, as beautiful as it is, represents only the thinnest skin of the ocean, a fragile layer of light and life, no more than 600 feet deep. Below that, the ocean becomes something else entirely. And that's where we're going. Not to the shallows, not to the reefs or the coastal waters, but down past the light, down past the familiar, down to a place where the rules change, where life adapts in ways that seem impossible, where the ocean shows you what it's really made of. Are you ready? Then take a deep breath, relax your shoulders, let your thoughts drift like jellyfish on a current, and begin your descent. The first thing you notice, as you sink below the sunlit zone, is the light. It doesn't disappear all at once. Instead, it fades gradually, like a slow sunset that takes hours instead of minutes. The brilliant blues and greens of the surface begin to soften, to mute, to lose their vibrancy. This is the twilight zone, and it stretches from about 600 feet down to 3,300 feet. Here the light becomes dim and diffused, a perpetual dusk that never brightens into day, and never darkens into true night. It's the ocean's quiet hour, the in-between place, where shadows are born. At this depth, colors begin to disappear. Red goes first. Red light has the longest wavelength, and water absorbs it quickly. Within the first 30 feet of descent, anything red looks black or gray, then orange fades, then yellow. By the time you reach 300 feet, even green is starting to struggle. By 600 feet, in the twilight zone, the only color left is blue, a deep haunting blue that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. This is why many deep-sea creatures are red. In a world without red light, being red makes you invisible. It's the ocean's version of camouflage, a kind of adaptive genius. A bright red shrimp, which would stand out like a beacon in shallow water, becomes a ghost down here, a shadow among shadows. But the loss of color is just the beginning. The temperature drops too. The warm surface waters give way to colder layers, distinct thermal zones separated by invisible boundaries. You can feel them as you descend. Brief moments where the water suddenly chills, like stepping through a doorway into a walk-in freezer. The pressure increases as well, though you wouldn't feel it directly if you were somehow able to make this journey in your body. Pressure builds gradually, steadily, adding about 1 atmosphere, roughly 14.7 pounds per square inch, for every 33 feet you descend. At 330 feet, you're experiencing 10 times the pressure you felt at the surface. At 3,300 feet, it's 100 times. For humans, this kind of pressure is deadly without protection. Our bodies are designed for surface life, for air pressure and sunlight, but for the creatures that live here, this pressure is normal. It's home. They've evolved over millions of years to not just survive it, but to thrive in it. And that's one of the beautiful paradoxes of the deep ocean. What seems hostile to us, lethal even, is simply life to them. The darkness isn't frightening. The cold isn't uncomfortable. The pressure isn't crushing. It's just the ocean, their ocean. As you continue down through the twilight zone, you begin to notice something strange. Little sparks of light, tiny flashes in the darkness. They appear and disappear, scattered through the water, like stars blinking in and out of existence. Some are brief, mere pinpricks. Others glow steadily, small lanterns drifting through the gloom. This is bioluminescence, one of the ocean's most magical adaptations. Down here, where sunlight is scarce and fading fast, many creatures have learned to make their own light. They produce it through chemical reactions in specialized organs called photophores, mixing luciferin with oxygen, in the presence of an enzyme called luciferase. The result is light without heat, a cold glow that can be blue, green, or sometimes even red. Why do they do this? For many reasons, all of them clever. Some use light to attract prey, dangling glowing lures in front of their mouths like fishermen with lanterns. Others use it to communicate, flashing patterns to potential mates or rivals. Some create light to confuse predators, releasing glowing clouds like underwater fireworks to cover their escape. And others use it for camouflage, a technique called counter-illumination, where they produce light on their undersides to match the faint glow from above, erasing their silhouettes. One of the most famous practitioners of bioluminescence is the hatchetfish. It's a small silver creature with a body shaped like, well, a hatchet, thin and blade-like when viewed from the front. Its belly is lined with photophores that glow with just the right intensity to match the dim light filtering down from above. From below, a predator looking up wouldn't see a dark shape against the slightly lighter water. It would see nothing. The hatchetfish becomes invisible, blending perfectly into the background glow. There are lanternfish here too, tiny creatures no bigger than your finger, but so abundant that they make up one of the largest biomasses in the ocean. During the day, they stay deep, hiding in the twilight zone. But at night, they migrate upward in massive schools, following the zooplankton toward the surface to feed. It's one of the largest migrations on Earth, and it happens every single night, a vast vertical movement of life that most of us never see or think about. This migration, this daily rise and fall of billions of creatures, is part of what's called the biological pump. The lanternfish and other migrating animals feed near the surface at night, then return to depth during the day, carrying nutrients with them. When they excrete waste or die, that organic matter sinks even deeper, transferring carbon and nutrients from the sunlit surface to the dark depths below. It's a critical part of the ocean's ecosystem, a kind of conveyor belt that feeds the deep and helps regulate the planet's carbon cycle. But we're not staying here in the twilight zone. As beautiful and strange as it is, it's only the beginning. So we continue down, sinking slowly, watching the last traces of blue light fade into blackness. And then at around 3,300 feet, the darkness becomes absolute. We've entered the midnight zone. There is no light here. None. No glimmer from above. No hint of day or night. If you were to shine a flashlight in this darkness, the beam would cut through the water like a knife. But beyond its reach, there would be nothing. Just an endless enveloping black. This is the midnight zone, and it extends from about 3,300 feet down to 13,000 feet. It's a world defined by absence, no light, little food, and a cold that hovers just above freezing. The water temperature here is a steady 39 degrees Fahrenheit, a perpetual winter. And yet, even here, life persists. In fact, the midnight zone is home to some of the ocean's most bizarre and fascinating creatures. They've had to adapt in extreme ways, developing strategies and features that seem almost alien, almost impossible. But down here, in the dark, they work. Take the anglerfish, for example. If you've ever seen a picture of a deep-sea fish with a glowing lure dangling in front of its face, you've seen an anglerfish. The females, which are much larger than the males, carry a modified dorsal spine that extends forward like a fishing rod, tipped with a glowing bulb filled with bioluminescent bacteria. They wave this lure slowly through the water, a tiny beacon in the darkness, and when a curious fish comes to investigate, the anglerfish strikes, engulfing it with jaws that can open almost 180 degrees. But the anglerfish's reproductive strategy is even stranger than its hunting technique. The males are tiny, sometimes 100 times smaller than the females. When a male finds a female, he bites into her body and fuses with her, permanently. His tissues merge with hers, their circulatory systems connect, and over time, he becomes little more than a parasitic appendage, providing sperm whenever she's ready to reproduce. In return, he receives nutrients from her bloodstream. It's a bizarre arrangement, but in the vast, empty darkness of the midnight zone, where finding a mate is incredibly difficult, it ensures that when a male and female do meet, they never have to search again. Then there's the gulper eel, also called the pelican eel, a creature that looks like something from a nightmare or a fever dream. It has an enormous mouth, hinged jaws that can open wide enough to swallow prey much larger than itself, and a long whip-like tail tipped with a glowing organ. Its body is mostly mouth and stomach, a living net designed to catch whatever scarce food drifts by in the darkness. The viperfish is another midnight zone resident, armed with teeth so long they can't fit inside its mouth. These fangs curve backward, designed to impale prey and prevent escape. The viperfish's lower jaw can unhinge, allowing it to swallow large meals whole, and it has photophores along its sides that can flash in patterns, possibly to startle prey or communicate with others of its kind. And there are many more. The fangtooth, with teeth proportionally larger than any other fish. The barreli, with a transparent head and tubular eyes that can rotate to look upward or forward. The dragonfish, with a long barbel under its chin that glows red, one of the few deep-sea creatures that can produce and see red light, giving it a unique advantage in the hunt. All of these creatures share certain traits, adaptations to life in the midnight zone. Many have large mouths and expandable stomachs, allowing them to eat meals much larger than themselves, because food is so rare that they can't afford to be picky. Many have reduced skeletons and watery tissues, making them neutrally buoyant so they don't have to waste energy swimming just to stay in place. Many have large eyes to capture as much light as possible, even the faint glow of bioluminescence, or in some cases, no eyes at all, because in absolute darkness, vision becomes less important than other senses. Some deep-sea fish have developed exceptionally sensitive lateral lines, organs that detect vibrations and movements in the water. Others have enhanced senses of smell, able to detect the chemical traces left by potential prey or mates from great distances. In the midnight zone, survival isn't about being fast or strong, it's about being patient, efficient, and exquisitely adapted to a world of scarcity. Food in the midnight zone comes primarily from above, in the form of marine snow. That's the term scientists use for the constant gentle rain of organic particles that drifts down from the sunlit surface: dead plankton, fecal pellets, discarded mucus, bits of decomposing animals. It sounds unappetizing, but to the creatures of the deep, this marine snow is life itself. It's the primary source of nutrients, the foundation of the food web. Some animals filter it directly from the water, others wade on the seafloor, gathering whatever settles there, and some, like the anglerfish and viperfish, are active hunters, preying on the creatures that feed on the marine snow. It's a slow, patient existence, a world where meals are few and far between, where energy must be conserved and every movement counts. But the midnight zone, vast as it is not the end of our journey. Below this dark realm lies something even more extreme, even more remote. So we continue our descent, sinking past 13,000 feet, leaving the midnight zone behind. And we enter the abyss. The abyssal zone stretches from 13,000 feet down to about 20,000 feet, covering vast stretches of the ocean floor. This is the deep sea proper, the realm that most people imagine when they think of the ocean's depths. It's a flat, featureless plain in many places, covered in fine sediment that has accumulated over millions of years, a soft ooze made of the skeletal remains of microscopic plankton. The temperature here is barely above freezing. The pressure is crushing, hundreds of times what we experience at the surface, and the darkness is total and unrelenting. No light has reached this depth in billions of years, not since the ocean itself was formed. And yet, even here, at the bottom of the abyss, life finds a way. The abyssal plain is home to a variety of creatures that have adapted to this extreme environment. There are sea cucumbers, strange, sluggish animals that inch along the seafloor, sifting through the sediment for organic particles. Some look like lumpy pickles, others like translucent sausages, and still others have evolved bizarre appendages and frills. There are brittle stars, relatives of starfish, with long, thin arms that they use to capture passing bits of marine snow. There are amphipods, shrimp-like crustaceans that can grow surprisingly large in the deep sea, some reaching nearly a foot in length. There are isopods, relatives of the pill bugs you might find in your garden, but here they've grown to monstrous sizes, some species reaching over a foot long, with segmented bodies and multiple legs that give them an almost alien appearance. One of the most famous abyssal creatures is the sea pig, a type of sea cucumber that has evolved leg-like appendages called tube feet. They waddle slowly across the seafloor in small herds, feeding on organic matter in the sediment. They're pale, almost translucent, and they look like something between a piglet and a deep-sea balloon animal. They're strange, yes, but also oddly endearing, going about their slow business in the darkness. The abyssal zone is also home to various species of fish, though they're fewer in number here than in the zones above. There are rattails, also called grenadiers, long, tapering fish with large heads and eyes, and whip-like tails that give them their name. There are snailfish, soft-bodied, gelatinous fish that can live deeper than almost any other vertebrate, some species found at depths exceeding 26,000 feet. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about the abyssal zone isn't the creatures themselves, but the ecosystems that exist there in isolated pockets, thriving in ways that no one expected. In 1977, scientists exploring the Galapagos Rift in a deep-sea submersible made a discovery that changed our understanding of life on Earth. They found hydrothermal vents, underwater geysers spewing superheated water, sometimes reaching temperatures of 750 degrees Fahrenheit, from cracks in the ocean floor. These vents form where seawater seeps into the Earth's crust, gets heated by volcanic activity, and then erupts back out, carrying dissolved minerals with it. What shocked the scientists wasn't just the vents themselves but what was living around them. Despite the crushing pressure, the near-freezing ambient water, and the toxic chemicals, life was abundant. There were clusters of giant tube worms, some reaching lengths of 8 feet, their red plumes waving in the current. There were fields of white crabs, clouds of shrimp, and mats of bacteria covering the rocks. This was life thriving in one of the harshest environments imaginable, and it was doing so without any energy from the sun. In the sunlit surface, all life ultimately depends on photosynthesis, on plants and algae converting sunlight into energy. But here, at these hydrothermal vents, life had found a different path. It was using chemosynthesis, a process where bacteria derive energy from the chemicals in the vent fluids, primarily hydrogen sulfide. These bacteria formed the base of an entirely new food web. The giant tube worms, which have no mouths or digestive systems, house these bacteria in specialized organs and live off the nutrients the bacteria produce. The crabs and shrimp feed on the bacteria directly or on each other. The entire ecosystem exists in isolation, independent of the sun. The discovery of hydrothermal vents revolutionized biology. It proved that life could exist in ways we'd never imagined, in places we'd never thought to look. It expanded the possibilities for where life might exist elsewhere in the universe, on icy moons with subsurface oceans, on planets far from their stars. If life could thrive at the bottom of Earth's ocean without sunlight, maybe it could thrive in other dark, remote places too. Since that first discovery, hundreds of hydrothermal vent sites have been found around the world, each with its own unique community of organisms. Some vents are home to yeti crabs, pale crustaceans covered in hair-like setae that harbor bacteria. Some are surrounded by snails with iron-plated shells, the only animals known to incorporate iron into their skeletons. Each vent is like a little oasis in the desert of the abyssal plain, a pocket of warmth and energy in an otherwise cold, dark world. But we're not done yet. The abyssal zone, remarkable as it is not the deepest part of the ocean. Below the abyss lies something even more extreme, even more remote. Below 20,000 feet, we enter the Hadal zone, named after Hades, the Greek underworld. And this is where the true journey begins. The Hadal zone exists only in the deep ocean trenches, those long, narrow depressions where one tectonic plate is diving beneath another. There are only a few dozen trenches on Earth, scattered around the Pacific Rim and a few other locations, and they account for less than 1% of the ocean floor. But they represent the deepest parts of the ocean, the most extreme environment on the planet's surface. The Mariana Trench is the deepest of them all. It's a subduction zone, where the Pacific Plate is sliding beneath the smaller Mariana Plate, creating a massive underwater canyon. The trench itself is relatively narrow, only about 43 miles wide at most points, but it's incredibly long, stretching over 1,500 miles in a gentle arc. And at its deepest point, a spot called Challenger Deep, the ocean floor lies nearly 36,000 feet below the surface. That's almost 7 miles straight down. To reach that depth, we'll have to descend through another 16,000 feet of water, past the abyssal plain, into the Hadal zone. This final stretch of our journey will take us to pressures exceeding 1,000 atmospheres, over 15,000 pounds per square inch. If you tried to dive that deep in a submarine, the hull would need to be incredibly thick, specially designed to withstand forces that could crush a car like a tin can. But we're not in a submarine. We're in our imaginations, where the pressure is only as real as we make it. So let's continue, slowly, calmly, into the deepest darkness. As we descend below 20,000 feet, the water feels different, though feel isn't quite the right word. The darkness is absolute, unchanged from the midnight zone miles above, but there's a sense of weight now, a palpable presence. The ocean above us is a mountain of water, pressing down with unimaginable force. The Hadal zone is, in many ways, the most mysterious part of the ocean. It's been explored less than the surface of the Moon or Mars. Only a handful of crude submersibles have ever reached these depths, and even robotic landers and cameras are rare. The technology required is expensive and complex, and the missions are risky. Equipment can fail, communications can be lost, and the return journey is long and uncertain. The first humans to reach Challenger Deep were Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh, who descended in a bathyscaphe called Trieste in 1960. They spent only about 20 minutes at the bottom, peering out through a tiny porthole, before beginning the long ascent back to the surface. What they saw was limited, a patch of seafloor illuminated by their lights, but it was enough to prove that humans could reach the deepest point on Earth. It would be over 50 years before anyone returned. In 2012, filmmaker James Cameron made a solo dive to Challenger Deep in a specially designed submersible called Deepsea Challenger. He spent several hours on the bottom, collecting samples and filming, capturing high-definition footage of this alien landscape. His expedition revealed a barren, featureless plain of pale sediment, with few visible signs of life. But as we now know, life is there, even if it's not immediately obvious. Since then, a handful of other explorers and scientists have made the journey, each adding to our understanding of this remote realm. But even with all these expeditions combined, we've probably explored less than a fraction of a percent of the Hadal zone. It remains one of the last true frontiers on Earth, a place of profound mystery. As we approach the bottom, moving through the final few thousand feet, we might begin to wonder what could possibly live down here. What kind of organism could survive pressures that would instantly kill most surface life? What would they eat? In a place where marine snow takes days or even weeks to drift down from above? The answer, as with so much of the deep ocean, is both surprising and beautiful. The Hadal zone is home to a variety of creatures, though they're fewer in number and less diverse than in the zones above. The most common are amphipods, those shrimp-like crustaceans we encountered in the abyss. But here, in the Hadal zone, they've grown to sizes that seem almost impossible. Some species reach lengths of nearly a foot, with bodies built like armor to withstand the crushing pressure. These amphipods are scavengers, feeding on whatever organic material sinks down from above. When a whale dies at the surface, for example, its body eventually sinks, a process called a whale fall. It descends slowly, over days or weeks, until it finally comes to rest on the seafloor. For the creatures of the Hadal Zone, a whale fall is like a feast, a massive delivery of nutrients that can sustain an entire community for years. The amphipods swarm over the carcass, consuming flesh, blubber and bone. They're joined by other scavengers, snailfish, rattails, crabs, and a host of smaller organisms. The whale fall becomes a temporary oasis, a burst of life in an otherwise sparse environment. Over time, the skeleton is colonized by bacteria that break down the lipids in the bones, and these bacteria, in turn, support other organisms. A single whale fall can support a thriving ecosystem for decades. But whale falls are rare. Most of the time, the Hadal Zone is a place of scarcity, where meals are few and far between, and survival depends on patience and efficiency. The creatures here have evolved to be incredibly tolerant of starvation, able to go weeks or even months without food. Their metabolisms are slow, their movements economical. They don't waste energy. One of the most remarkable Hadal creatures is the snailfish. These soft-bodied gelatinous fish look almost translucent, with loose floppy skin and fins that seem too delicate for such an extreme environment. But appearances can be deceiving. Snailfish have been found at depths exceeding 26,000 feet in the Mariana Trench, making them some of the deepest living fish ever recorded. How do they survive such pressures? The key lies in their biochemistry. Snailfish produce special molecules called piezolites, organic compounds that counteract the effects of pressure on their cells and proteins. These piezolites, primarily a compound called trimethylamine N-oxide, or TMAO, stabilize the fish's cellular structures, preventing them from collapsing under the weight of the ocean. It's a beautiful example of adaptation, a chemical solution to a physical problem. Interestingly, there seems to be a depth limit for fish. Below about 27,000 feet, the pressure becomes so great that even with piezolites, the fish's cells can't function properly. The proteins that make up their bodies begin to fail, unable to maintain their shapes. This is why we don't find fish at the very deepest points of the trench. The Hadal Zone, at its extremes, is beyond their reach. But that doesn't mean life stops there. Invertebrates, creatures without backbones, can go deeper. They have different body plans, different biochemistries, and they're more flexible in the face of extreme pressure. Amphipods have been found all the way down to Challenger deep, as have sea cucumbers and other simple organisms. In fact, when James Cameron reached the bottom of Challenger Deep, one of the first things he noticed was a small translucent sea cucumber, moving slowly across the sediment. It was a humble creature, nothing dramatic or monstrous, but it was alive, thriving in the most extreme environment on Earth. It was a reminder that life, given enough time and the right conditions, can adapt to almost anything. And then there are the microbes, bacteria and archaea, single-celled organisms that are found in every environment on Earth, from boiling hot springs to frozen Antarctic ice. In the Hadal Zone, they're everywhere, invisible to the naked eye but present in staggering numbers. They coat the sediment, forming thin films and mats. They colonize organic matter, breaking it down and recycling nutrients. They live in symbiosis with larger organisms, providing energy in exchange for shelter. Some of these microbes are extremophiles, organisms that thrive in conditions that would kill most life. There are barophiles, which love high pressure. There are psychrophiles, which prefer cold temperatures. There are chemotrophs, which derive energy from chemical reactions rather than sunlight. These microbes are the foundation of the Hadal ecosystem, the primary producers in a world without light. And they might hold clues to the origin of life itself. Some scientists believe that life on Earth may have begun in the deep ocean, around hydrothermal vents, or in the sediments of the Hadal Zone, where conditions were stable and protected from the harsh environment of the early Earth's surface. If that's true, then the creatures of the Hadal Zone are the descendants of Earth's first organisms, the inheritors of a lineage that stretches back billions of years. As we finally touch down on the floor of Challenger Deep, settling gently onto the pale, fine sediment, we take a moment to appreciate where we are. 7 miles below the surface, at the deepest point in the ocean, in a place that fewer than a dozen humans have ever seen. The water is still. There's no current here, no waves, no turbulence, just a profound, almost sacred quiet. The temperature is just above freezing, the pressure is over 1,000 atmospheres, and the darkness is total, but we're not afraid. We're not uncomfortable, because in this moment we've let go of our surface-dwelling instincts, our human biases about what feels right or normal. We've learned to see the Hole Zone not as a hostile place, but as a different kind of home, a place where life has found its own path, its own rhythm, its own beauty. Looking around, with lights that exist only in our imagination, we see the gentle undulations of the seafloor, the fine sediment disturbed here and there by the passage of some unseen creature. In the distance, perhaps, a ghostly snailfish drifts by, its body nearly invisible against the dark. An amphipod moves slowly across our field of view, armored and ancient-looking, a tiny tank navigating the abyss. And beneath us, in the sediment itself, billions of microbes are quietly working, breaking down organic matter, cycling nutrients, supporting the web of life that exists even here, in the most remote corner of the planet. It's humbling, isn't it, to realize that life is so persistent, so resourceful, so determined to exist, that even in the deepest darkness, under the most extreme conditions, it finds a way. But our journey isn't just about the creatures that live here. It's about the ocean itself, about understanding what the Hole Zone represents, and why places like the Mariana Trench matter. The deep ocean plays a crucial role in Earth's climate and ecosystem. It's the largest habitat on the planet, covering more than 60% of the Earth's surface and containing over 90% of the biosphere's volume. It acts as a massive carbon sink, absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and storing it in deep waters and sediments for thousands of years. It regulates temperature, distributing heat around the globe through ocean currents, and it supports biodiversity, harboring an estimated 1 million or more species, many of which we haven't even discovered yet. The Hole Zone, specifically, is important because it's a window into the extremes of what life can tolerate. By studying the creatures that live here, scientists can learn about the limits of biology, the mechanisms of adaptation, and the resilience of ecosystems. This knowledge has practical applications too. The pressure-resistant proteins found in Hole organisms could inspire new materials and technologies. The enzymes used by deep-sea bacteria could be useful in industrial processes, and understanding how life survives in extreme environments on Earth helps us search for life elsewhere in the universe. But the deep ocean is also under threat. Even at these remote depths, human activity is having an impact. Plastic pollution has been found in the Mariana Trench, carried down by currents and deposited on the seafloor. Microplastics have been discovered in the bodies of Hole amphipods, ingested as they feed on sinking organic matter. Chemical pollutants, including persistent organic compounds that were banned decades ago, have been detected in the tissues of deep-sea animals. These pollutants are transported to the deep by sinking particles and remain there for long periods, accumulating in the food web. There's also the potential threat of deep-sea mining. Companies are interested in extracting minerals from the seafloor, including manganese nodules, polymetallic sulfides, and rare earth elements. While most mining interest is focused on the abyssal plains rather than the Hole trenches, the activities could still have far-reaching effects. Mining operations could disturb sediments, release clouds of particles that smother organisms, destroy habitats, and disrupt ecosystems that we're only just beginning to understand. And then there's climate change. The deep ocean is not immune to the warming of the planet. While the Hole Zone itself is buffered by its depth and isolation, changes at the surface, such as warming waters, ocean acidification, and shifting currents, will eventually cascade down, altering the flow of nutrients and the distribution of marine snow. These changes could have profound effects on deep-sea ecosystems, effects that we're not yet able to predict. So even though the Hole Zone feels distant and disconnected from our daily lives, it's not. It's part of the same planet, the same ocean, the same interconnected web of life. What happens at the surface affects the deep, and what happens in the deep, in turn, influences the surface. We're all connected, from the shallowest tide pool to the deepest trench. And that, perhaps, is the most important lesson of our journey, that the ocean is not a collection of separate zones and habitats, but a single unified system, that life in the Hole Zone depends on life at the surface, and vice versa, that the health of the deep ocean is tied to the health of the entire planet. As we begin our slow ascent back to the surface, Rising gently through the darkness, we carry with us a new appreciation for the ocean's depths. We've seen things that most people will never see, creatures that exist in a world so different from our own that they might as well be from another planet. We've learned about pressure and cold, about darkness and light, about survival and adaptation. But more than that, we've learned about wonder, about the quiet beauty of places that don't shout for attention, that don't dazzle with color or movement, but simply exist, calmly and patiently, in the deepest corners of the world. As we rise through the Hole zone, leaving the bottom behind, we pass once again through that profound silence. The darkness remains total, but now it feels less oppressive, more like a blanket than a void. We know what's down there now. We've touched the bottom. We've seen the life that persists even in the most extreme conditions. And as we continue upward, through the abyssal zone, through the midnight zone, through the twilight zone, and finally back into the sunlit surface waters, we bring that knowledge with us. We bring the memory of the snailfish and the amphipods, the sea cucumbers, and the bacteria, the microbes working in the sediment and the tube worms thriving at the hydrothermal vents.